Welcome back to MegaBuild, episode 2. I want to start off by saying I kind of feel like I wronged BMW a little bit in the first video where I was mentioning, brittle plastic parts and this and that and things breaking. There's one thing I noticed during this build, and it's actually how easy this car is to work on. If you don't have much experience working on your car and you're going to tackle this project on your own, I think you're going to feel the same way. The reason why I feel this car is so easy to work on is because of all the quick disconnects. Whether it be oil lines, coolant lines, vacuum lines with the little pinch tabs you pull off, the intercooler with the clips that pull out. I first noticed it but didn't give it much thought. I actually thought it was kind of silly. But when I did the charge pipe, in June of 2018, like a month after I bought this car, I thought it was kind of ridiculous the way that the charge pipe attaches to the throttle body with this sliding clip. This is stupid, but in actuality, it makes swapping out parts on these cars super easy, which makes me think of BMW's racing heritage. Swapping parts out on a race car with just a bunch of quick disconnects, super simple. So I want to say thank you to BMW. Thank you for all the years of racing and knowledge and things that you've learned and put into the road-going cars of today. We're going to start off this part of the project with draining the coolant. And if you're going to do an oil change, draining the oil out of the car as well. When it comes to draining coolant out of this car, you're never going to drain it completely. When you pull the thermostat off the car, you're still going to leak more coolant. So be ready for that as well. You'll see it in the video. All right, I've been bumping my gums long enough. Let's go. Wait, you didn't wash your hands already, did you? Get back under your car.
This is your electric power steering rack, just as a reference. Right above it here, this sideways looking can thing, this is your water pump. The water pump is held onto a bracket that's bolted to the block here, but there's 2 bolts in the bottom of the water pump. You can see, there we go, pull this to the side. You can see the 2 bolts right here. There's also a 3rd bolt that's on the top, but you can't reach it because the turbo pipe, which is literally like right here above it, the turbo pipe is in the way, so you can't reach this bolt with a wrench or anything. So in order to get to that, we're going to remove the turbo pipe. Well, coincidentally, we're going to upgrade the turbo pipe. In order to get to the turbo pipe, to the other end of it here, the easiest way is to remove a bunch of things up top. But first, before we go back up top, wrap your power steering rack here in a trash bag. Get your, whatever collection bowl, unit giant thing you're going to use to collect all the coolant. I would say you're going to get at least a gallon out of here, at least. So hopefully it holds more than, a gallon. But you're going to disconnect this worm clamp right here, and this is a 6 mil. So just loosen this, and then it'll take some finagling. I used a trim tool to pull this hose off. Yeah, there's still coolant coming out of it. So just make sure you wear a face shield or something. You're going to remove this pipe, drain as much coolant out as it's going to come out. I mean, it's going to drip continuously no matter what. Let's go up top now, and I'll show you what you need to remove on the top side of the motor.
All right, I did forget to mention earlier, but pull the engine cover off. With as much coolant out of the system already, that should have drained. Hopefully it's slowed down by now. Next thing we're going to remove is a part that I've already replaced on this car. Just happened to randomly break one day. I was wiping stuff in the motor down, and this coolant line to the expansion tank just broke right here. Like right where the connector connects to this part. This snapped. It was like a $70 part at the BMW dealer. We're going to disconnect it. The other line that's here, this actually is the cable for the hood latch. There are 2 hood latches on the car. When you pull the thing twice, it unlatches both of these. That's all this is. This is the cable for it. You don't need to detach this. It's not going to be in the way, so don't worry about it. Be prepared if these do break on you to replace them, but all you got to do is push the pick tool in here, gently pull up, and I try to keep my fingers on the back side of this little clip in case it does come all the way off. At least it's not going to go flying somewhere.
Get a shop towel handy because it is going to leak some coolant. You know, hold a shop towel on it. Pulling it out of these other clips that are here, I would definitely consider this a fragile piece. You got the other pin here. Pull up. Like, yeah, see, this one just came off, but I have my finger on it. So I've got the line disconnected. It's unhooked from, you know, the little clips here. It's gonna leak here as well. So pull it off and rotate this thing like this and then pull it out. Because there's not enough room to push it out completely. I don't want you to bend this thing at all because it'll probably crack. But just be prepared. You probably have to replace this thing. Next is the expansion tank, and you can remove the cap, open this sucker up, and if you've got a turkey baster, you can use a turkey baster and suck out as much as you can. It's not absolutely necessary to suck all the extra coolant that's in the reservoir. When we disconnect the line that's on the bottom of it, just plug it with your finger and stop the fluid from leaking all over the place. Then we have another 8mm screw right here to pull out. Before we do anything else, there's a coolant line attached to the bottom of this and one of the electrical connections that tells you if it's full or not. We have to go through the fender here, and I'll show you that. In the wheel well, and this is why you got to remove the fender well lining. You just need your pick tool again to use it on this little clip to pull this off, and it's going to leak more coolant out, so be ready for that. And then you need to remove this, but it's actually easier to pull it out after you disconnect this. So disconnect that. You know, slots in the frame rail right there. That's how the expansion tank fits in right there. It just fits in, slides in those slots. There's the electrical connection on the bottom. And all you have to do is push on this. That comes right off. I'm not really sure if you can tell or not, but my expansion tank, of course, the connection there is just heinous and dirty. So if I wasn't replacing this, I would clean that. But I tried squirting fluid in here, everything. Like, there's just a ton of sediment and dirt in my expansion tank, which is why I'm replacing it. All right, before I do anything else, this is the bottom of that expansion tank. This is that, you know, connection. I'm gonna use some tape here, and you could use one of the Ziploc bags if you want, but you're not going to get any coolant that comes out of that unless you tip it over. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap some painter's tape like halfway up around it. Then I'm going to make an X over the top. So I don't get anything that actually falls into this tube while it's sitting here. I don't know. Maybe it's a little paranoid, but just in case. I don't want anything to fall in there, a screw or plastic or anything. Next, we're going to remove this, you know, cooler transfer unit thing here. This has both oil and engine coolant running through it. The top line here is oil, and the top line on the other side here, this is oil, and this goes down to the oil cooler. This line here connects to the oil, you know, cooler where the oil filter is, the oil filter housing. You know, that's what this line connects to. This line here, this is just clipped in. This just comes right off. You have to unclip this to get the thing out anyway. But the line that's right here, this is a coolant line, and the one that's underneath over here, this is another coolant line. So there's coolant going through the bottom part, and there's oil going through the top part. First, we're gonna undo the 4 screws that hold this thing in place. There are 4 total. This is the long one. E10, the external Torx. There's another screw right here, and the last 2 screws are actually underneath, and you have to go through the fender to reach these. Looking at it through the fender, you got this screw right here and the other one right there. So you just need to unscrew these. Now we're getting to the messy part. First, we're going to disconnect this oil line and this oil line. Just pull the pins out, and same thing, I would say put your finger over this, so if you do pull the little retaining clip all the way out, it just comes off in your hand. The other one, you actually have to, it's easier to reach from the bottom. Before I disconnect this, I'm gonna get a bunch of terry towels, and I'm gonna shove a bunch of terry towels under here because if it does leak oil, it's gonna leak oil on the turbo potentially and part of the exhaust manifold there, so I don't want oil getting all over that. But I got my Ziploc bag, my backup terry towels, and pull this off and just push it right into the Ziploc bag. Make sure you keep it right side up, so if it does leak, it goes into the bag. Same thing with the other one right here, and throw a Ziploc bag over it. You know, something else you could do, you know, use some of your tape. Run some tape around this just to, you know, kind of hold it in place here. In case you bump it, it doesn't fall off. Next, we need to remove the 2 coolant lines. This is gonna leak coolant, but as long as you keep this one up as high as you can, it won't leak too much. You're not gonna get much coolant leaking out of this one right here, but as long as you got your pan down there, you should be good. All right, I'm gonna move this out of the way. So that's it. This is gonna leak some oil, so I'm gonna set this in my oil drain pan. Okay, so now that this is out of the way, let me grab all these terry towels out of here. And I didn't get them very dirty, so I'm just gonna set them over here. Pull these hoses to the side. You can attach a zip tie or 2 or 6. You know, hold these things to the side. And right down here, boom. This is the turbo pipe. I know it doesn't look like you can really reach it, but honestly, it's right here. I can get my hand all the way around it. Pull the tab on this pipe. Once you get the clip off this turbo pipe, it'll just about, yeah, it literally just fell off and fell onto the ground. Here's the turbo pipe, and the narrow side, this is the part that goes on the turbo, and the big side, this is the part that goes to the intercooler. To remove the water pump, you have to disconnect this hose as well. So here's the hose we already pulled off to drain it. You've got this other hose, and this connects to, this tube just goes right back over by the turbo and connects to the engine block. Because we removed that turbo pipe, you can snake your hand in and actually, you know, touch the front of the turbo from here because, you know, just use the same route that that turbo pipe goes in where it connects to the intercooler. You can easily reach, and I know you can't see it directly, but my middle finger is touching the top bolt on the water pump. This is a 3/8 ratchet with like a 3-inch extension in my E12 socket. You can get up in here and reach that 3rd bolt from the bottom. To get these 2 bottom bolts on the water pump, I've got my E12 6-inch extension. You can reach these bolts pretty easy. And to reach the other one, I just thread the needle in between the cables here. When it comes to disconnecting the electrical part, you can actually reach through the fan, push on the clip, and then I used a small flat-headed screwdriver. With one finger, push the little tab on the pin, and with my other hand, all I did was rotate the screwdriver and it pushed the electrical connection off the side of the water pump. Water pump's disconnected. There, you can just wiggle it out through this spot. Now that we have the water pump out of the way, we have an easy and direct path right to the diverter valve. When you remove this clip from the diverter valve, all you have to do is push in on this right here. Just push in on the metal part and it comes right off, just like that. I just have my 5mm, ratchet on here. It's the 5mm ratchet and this is like a 3-inch extension on my 3/8-inch drive. And there's plenty of room in here. It's slow going, you'll get it. I did find it easier to get to the top right Allen bolt here for the bypass valve. It was easier to reach this if I removed this oil line. This goes from the block to the turbo. All it is a little T27. Just unscrew that. It is going to drip oil. So what I did was I have a rag here resting on top of the power steering rack, the electronic power steering. So as you know, a little oil did drip out of here. It just dripped, down the engine block and then onto my rag here. And I just swapped out the rag every once in a while just to make sure it didn't get too saturated and then start dripping on my face. Once you've removed the stock diverter valve, you have to put the oil line back on the block there. Reason being is this. Once you have the GoFastBits diverter valve upgrade attached to the stock diverter valve, it sticks out too far and you can't get the oil line back into the engine block. So make sure you attach the oil line back to the block before you put the modified diverter valve back on the car. Believe me, I learned this the hard way. Now that we have the stock diverter valve out, you need to disassemble it. So just pull the centerpiece out, it should pop right out. And the yellow O-ring on mine actually came out really easy. I didn't have to use my pick tool, but I did have the pick tool just in case. Next, pull the spring out of the center, then grab the GoFastBits spring. And if you can't tell the difference between the two, the GoFastBits spring is actually shorter than the stock spring, just so you know. Put the GoFastBits spring in, then the little plunger on top of that. Next, you have to replace the yellow O-ring, put it back in the groove on the diverter valve. Next, you have to put the top of the GoFastBits diverter valve on the stock diverter valve. The stock diverter valve actually has a nipple here, and you can see it right there. The GoFastBits piece actually has a little indent where that nipple fits. So once you find that, all you need to do is line it up and put the GoFastBits part on your diverter valve. Just push firmly and it snaps into place. You can grab one of the bolts and slide it in just to make sure it's seated properly and not twisted. Next, grab the larger spring and drop it in. Then last, you have the piston. I did put a thin coat of motor oil on the brass piston part before I put it in the car, just to make sure it flowed freely in and out of the diverter valve. Getting the diverter valve back on is definitely a pain in the butt for these two on the left side, top and the bottom. Simple, you can still reach these. The last bolt, there's not much room in here, and it's maybe just a little bit more than the width of my finger between this oil line from the turbo to the block and the end of the bolt. So this is that ball end 5mm, socket. If I reach my right arm up through where the turbo pipe goes, I know it's hard to see, but if you look underneath the car at that top right bolt for the diverter valve, you can easily get this in here. So obviously the bit isn't straight because this oil line that's here is directly in line with that bolt. So using this ball end socket, because it's rounded like that, it'll let you get it at an angle and you can completely tighten this thing. And I got it as tight as I can get it. That's it. It's not going any tighter. You can either go on the bottom side of this oil line, or you can actually sneak this in between the oil line and the engine block and get the little ball in there and get this thing tightened. I still have the turbo inlet pipe in place here, so you don't even have to take that out to get to the diverter valve. If you didn't feel like spending the money and buying that special ball end Allen wrench, you can still use the cutoff one. It'll work just fine. It'll take a little bit of time because it's slow going with the amount of space and how much you can actually rotate it, but you can still get it done, believe me. You can use either tool, both work just fine. This is the top right, this is the bottom, and this one is the top left. So I snugged the top left and the bottom one down because I could reach those with the ratchet easily. So I got those snugged down so I know the diverter valve is sitting flush on the turbo. So with my little stubby 5mm, I tightened the top right down as much as I could, and I can see that it sits flush on the diverter valve, so I know it's completely tight. Cool? All right, moving on. If you're doing an oil catch can, this is the part that you have to disconnect, because this comes off of the top of the valve cover here, and this connection goes into your catch can. I'm going to grab the new pipe to show you. The pipe here is supposed to have these 4 connectors on it. I tried using, like a a piece of cardboard, or I even tried like a tape I stuck together to itself and tried wedging it in there to hold these things open. But the second I tried to pry on these things, bam, they snapped off. This plastic's old, it dry rotted. All these little connectors, except for one of them, actually broke off. This is what's left of my connector. Like I said, it's old plastic, it's brittle, and if you start moving this thing around and you hear any crunching, you're probably going to break it. I definitely would say order a new one before you do this. I think it was like 55 bucks. Yeah, I know it's expensive, but it's good to have one of these already on hand in case you do break this. So I'm gonna show you where mine broke. So I was trying to maneuver this thing to show, where it's gonna connect to the catch can to try to see if it's gonna work. Well, it broke. And it didn't just break in half, like in the middle of the tube. It completely broke off of the turbo inlet pipe. Not only did it snap in half completely here, it completely cracked off the turbo inlet pipe. At the beginning of this project, I didn't intend on getting a new turbo inlet pipe, but since I cracked the flange off of it where it connects to the crankcase breather tube, I figured, well, why buy a stock one if it's gonna cost me, almost 200 bucks? I might as well just pony up a little bit more money and get an upgrade. Know what I mean? Sometimes things break and they cause you to upgrade. Hey, whatever. There's electrical connection here you need to disconnect. I'm gonna tuck this in here. So you've got this torque screw that's supposed to hold it in place, and it should actually wiggle out of here. So there's a tab on here that actually screws onto the side of the block, and it's actually supposed to be attached to the turbo inlet pipe, but mine completely broke off. I didn't have a new one before I did this. I found out the hard way. I had to wait 2 or 3 days for the part to come in. If yours didn't break, little flange on the pipe that connects to your catch can here, this little 10 mil, this bolt is actually connected to a little, little winglet here, whatever you call it, that attaches to the inlet pipe. We still can't remove the turbo inlet pipe. We have to go back down under the car for that. One bolt we actually have to remove. It's actually a nut attached to a bolt attached to the turbo. Just use a little ratchet and get this one nut off of this threaded bolt here. And then you can just wiggle the intake tube out right out of the front of the turbo. And this is that bolt that goes into the turbo that the 10 mil nut screws onto that holds the stock turbo inlet pipe in. A 3 mil Allen socket on here fits right into the end of this, and a good crank cracked it loose and came right out. All right, that's gonna wrap it up for this episode. Hope you've enjoyed it so far. I'm trying to keep these around 25 minutes so I don't bore you to death. I mean, I know you're skipping through half of it anyways, but Episode 3, I'm going to start off with comparing the water pump that I pulled off the car, which is stock BMW, and the one that I bought, and you're really not going to be surprised. From there, we're going to move up to the electronic wastegate connector for the JB4, then the thermostat, and the coolant hose that connects the thermostat to the water pump and the expansion tank. Then we're going to move up to the turbo inlet pipe, then the boost pipe, and yes, I called it a boost pipe this time. And I think that'll probably wrap it up for that episode. Like I've said before, it's a lot easier to tackle this project if you do a couple modifications at once. If you're not a subscriber, please do. That way you can follow along on the rest of the MegaBuild. And make sure you hit that notification bell so you get notified the second I upload the next episode. See you in the next one. Cool? Later.